Some people believe rebirth is real. Others laugh at it and call it nonsense. Maybe they're right. Maybe rebirth doesn't exist at all. But sometimes life reveals truth so terrifying, so impossible, that logic itself becomes powerless. And when that truth stands right in front of us, we are forced to believe, whether we want to or not. Today's story is one of those truths. A loving husband trusted his wife with everything, his heart, his future, and even his life. But behind his back, his wife was poisoning him slowly while secretly living an affair with another man. She wanted his lottery fortune, she wanted freedom, and most of all, she wanted him dead. After murdering her husband, she thought the truth had been buried forever. But some souls refuse to die in betrayal. The universe heard his pain, destiny gave him another life, and the man they killed came back to take revenge.
Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from: Atlanta, Chicago, Miami, Houston, or somewhere else. Take a second to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming.
Terrence Johnson was a supervisor at Mercy General, not a doctor, not a surgeon, nobody who got thanked at galas or written about in magazines. He managed schedules, resolved staff conflicts, kept the administrative engine running quietly so the people with stethoscopes could focus on saving lives. His coworkers respected him. His boss trusted him. He was the kind of man institutions quietly depend on and rarely celebrate. His marriage to Monique had been good once. Early years genuinely warm. She was sharp, socially gifted, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's name and made them feel seen. They had built something together, not extravagant, but real. Then the years did what years do to hollow things. They made the hollowness more visible. By the time Terrence won the lottery, they hadn't argued in 8 months, not because things were resolved, but because they had both quietly stopped investing in the conflict. They shared a home the way two professional acquaintances share an office, politely, efficiently, without intimacy. The ticket was a random purchase, a Tuesday gas station stop, $5 scratched off the hood of his car. When the numbers matched, he sat very still for 45 seconds. Then he called Monique. She answered on the third ring, distracted. He told her. There was a pause, brief, almost imperceptible, and then her voice changed, not dramatically, not theatrically, just warmer, like a thermostat quietly adjusting. "Baby, oh my God, come home." Terrence smiled. He heard love in that voice. He was still capable of hearing love where there was none, which is in the end the thing that killed him. That evening, Monique cooked dinner for the first time in 3 months. She wore the perfume he liked. She touched his hand across the table and looked at him with something that resembled the woman he had married. Terrence felt the hollowness fill slightly. He thought, maybe this changes things. Maybe this is the beginning of something new for us. He had no way of knowing it was the beginning of his end.
Deshaun Carter was not a monster in the cinematic sense. He didn't have cold eyes or a menacing presence. He was 38, well-dressed, moderately successful in real estate, the kind of man who was charming at dinner parties and remembered to hold doors open. He and Monique had been involved for 14 months when the lottery happened. Their relationship existed in hotel rooms and afternoon disappearances, constructed carefully, maintained intelligently, concealed behind Monique's social fluency. When Monique called him that Tuesday night, not to share joy but to strategize, Deshaun didn't hesitate. He listened, he thought, and then he said quietly, "We don't have to leave, we just have to wait." The plan was not impulsive. That is the most important thing to understand. Impulsive people leave evidence through emotion. Monique and Deshaun were not emotional about this. They were architectural. The substance was researched carefully. A compound that, administered in microscopic daily doses, mimicked the slow deterioration of cardiac health. undetectable in standard autopsy unless specifically tested for, which required suspicion, which required someone to suspect. And who would suspect Monique? Devoted wife? Present at every doctor's appointment, tearful in the right moments, asking all the right questions in the right concerned voice. The administration was elegant in its simplicity. The coffee, every morning, the chipped blue mug that Terence refused to throw away. The irony was not lost on Monique. She mentioned it once to Deshawn, almost amused. He told her not to be sentimental about it. She wasn't. The first month, Terence noticed fatigue. He blamed the new scheduling software at work. The second month, mild chest discomfort. His doctor suggested stress reduction, light exercise, less caffeine. Monique nodded seriously at the appointment, and that evening made him herbal tea instead, in the mug. The third month, his blood pressure fluctuated. Fourth month, occasional dizziness. Fifth month, he began looking older. Colleagues noticed but said nothing, chalking it up to the stress of sudden wealth. His mother called him twice to say he sounded tired. He told her he was fine. Monique monitored everything with the precision of a woman who had decided on an outcome and was simply managing the timeline toward it. Every morning after he left, she sent Deshawn one text, just 2 words, always the same. Done. Check. 173 consecutive mornings.
November, a gray Thursday. Terence woke at 5:47 as always, but slower. His body had developed a heaviness that sleep no longer resolved. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, breathing, hands on his knees, the way older men do when they're negotiating with their own bodies. He was 41. He felt 67. He made coffee, blue mug. The chip on the handle fit naturally against his thumb now. He'd unconsciously adjusted his grip to accommodate it over years of use. He stood at the kitchen window and watched the November sky, that particular shade of gray that isn't dramatic, just final, like a decision already made by the atmosphere. He drank his coffee. He noticed the metallic aftertaste. He'd mentioned it once 2 months ago, and Monique had suggested it might be his medication interacting with the water filter. He had accepted this. He was a man who accepted reasonable explanations because he fundamentally believed the people around him were reasonable. He rinsed the mug, set it on the drying rack, went to get dressed. He was found by a colleague at 9:15 a.m., collapsed in his office, unresponsive. The paramedics worked quickly. The hospital where he'd spent 15 years supervising the administrative heartbeat, the hospital where every nurse knew his name, where the janitor saved him the good parking spot, where he had quietly and competently held things together, became the place where Terence Johnson was pronounced dead at 9:52 a.m. Cardiac event, natural causes. At the funeral, Monique wore a structured black dress and accepted condolences with grace. She cried, not excessively, which actually made her seem more genuine. Terence's mother, Eleanor, sat in the front row and watched her daughter-in-law through the entire service with eyes that were dry and very, very still. Eleanor didn't cry either. She was doing something else. She was remembering every small thing that had felt slightly wrong over the past 6 months. She couldn't assemble it into an accusation, but the feeling sat in her chest like a stone that would not dissolve. Nobody investigated. Why would they? A 41-year-old man with documented cardiac concerns, managed by his attentive wife, a hospital full of medical professionals who saw the deterioration and attributed it to biology, a death certificate signed with bureaucratic confidence. 43 days later, Monique married Deshawn Carter in a private ceremony at a boutique venue she'd already been researching before Terence's body was cold. The house was repainted, a warm beige that Monique had preferred for years and Terence had always vetoed, wanting the original blue.
The chipped mug was thrown away. The $28 million legally transferred through proper estate process into Monique's name as sole beneficiary because Terrence had updated his will 8 months earlier, persuaded by his wife that it was simply responsible financial planning, moved into her account and then into their jointly constructed financial infrastructure. Terrence Johnson ceased to exist. Then, somewhere in Chicago, a baby cries.
The Williams family did not discuss their wealth the way insecure wealthy families do, loudly through visible consumption. They discussed it the way old money discusses everything, quietly, strategically, with long-term thinking embedded in every decision. Raymond Williams had built his real estate and private equity empire over 30 years, starting with a single commercial property on the south side of Chicago and compounding from there with patience and precision. His wife, Diana, was an architect by training, a philanthropist by passion, and a mother with the particular emotional intelligence that produces either artists or leaders, usually both. Their son, Malik, was born on a January morning, healthy, alert, unremarkable in all the standard medical ways. But the nurse who delivered him mentioned to a colleague, quietly, that there was something unusual about the way the baby settled after his initial cry. Most newborns continue fussing, hungry, overwhelmed, adjusting. Malik cried for 40 seconds, stopped, and then looked around the room with an attention that felt less like infant instinct and more like orientation. Like he was checking where he was, the nurse said. Her colleague laughed. She didn't. As a toddler, Malik was perceptive beyond the charming range of normal precocity. He noticed things adults missed. He was physically comfortable, but socially cautious, warm with people he trusted, quietly watchful with new faces. He had one inexplicable aversion: coffee. Not just disinterest, physical revulsion. The smell made him turn away sharply, almost flinch. His parents found it amusing, a quirk. Raymond joked that it would save the boy money someday. Nobody connected it to anything. Why would they? What nobody saw, because children have no vocabulary for it and adults have no framework to receive it, was that occasionally, in the quiet spaces between activity, Malik would go very still. Not distracted, not daydreaming in the normal dissociative way of childhood, still in the way that suggested interior listening, as if someone in a far room was speaking and he was straining to hear. By age 10, he was academically exceptional, not because he studied harder, but because he absorbed patterns instinctively, retained information with unusual fidelity, and had a particular gift for understanding motivation, why people did what they did. His teachers called it emotional intelligence. His mother called it sensitivity. His father called it useful. Malik called it nothing. He didn't think about it. He just lived. Privileged, loved, preparing for a future in the Williams business legacy. But sometimes, in that particular quality of morning silence, he would sit with his hands folded and his jaw slightly tight, an expression no 10-year-old should architecturally possess, and stare at nothing. And the nothing would almost stare back.
The Williams family is in Atlanta for a real estate conference, and Malik is 17 years old. Raymond presenting, Diana accompanying. Malik brought along because his father believes in early immersion. You learn this business by being in rooms, Raymond always said, not by reading about rooms. The hotel is elegant. Marble floors, high ceilings, the kind of lobby that manages warmth and grandeur simultaneously. They're checking in, luggage being handled, Raymond at the front desk, Diana on her phone, Malik standing slightly apart with his hands in his jacket pockets. And then the song begins. It's coming from the lobby bar, a pianist running through a set, background music for the cocktail hour crowd. An old R&B track,
mid-tempo, a particular chord progression that was unremarkable to every other person in that lobby. Malik hears the first 4 bars and stops existing in the present tense. It isn't dramatic. His body doesn't convulse. He doesn't collapse. He simply stops, mid-step, hands still in pockets, face going from casual alertness to something blank and very distant, like a screen losing its signal. The sound moves through him not as music, but as information, pulling at something buried beneath 17 years of accumulated living. He sees, not with his eyes, but somewhere behind them, a kitchen. Morning light, the particular amber quality of early sun through white curtains. A counter, a coffee maker finishing its cycle, and a hand, a woman's hand, rings on 2 fingers, stirring a mug slowly, deliberately, with a patience that had nothing to do with coffee temperature. The mug has a chip on the handle. It lasts less than 2 seconds, then it's gone, snatched back like a photograph pulled from his hands before he could read it fully. Malik stands frozen for 40 seconds. A hotel guest moves around him with mild annoyance. He doesn't notice. He is trying to hold the image, the kitchen, the light, the hand, the mug, but it's already dissolving the way dreams dissolve when you reach for them. Diana touches his arm. "Malik, baby, you okay?" He turns to her. Her face brings him back, the present assembling itself around him again. "Yeah," he says. "Sorry, just tired." She accepts this. He is 17. Tired is a permanent condition. But that night, in his hotel room, after his parents have said goodnight, after the city outside has settled into its late frequency, Malik lies on his back and stares at the ceiling and does not sleep. He is not afraid. He is something more precise than afraid. He is certain, with a certainty that has no rational source, that the kitchen he saw was real, that the mug was real, that the hand belonged to someone he knew in a way that predated every person he had ever met in this life. He thinks, "Why do I know that kitchen?" He thinks, "Whose hand was that?" He does not yet think, "Why does the memory feel like a warning?"
The months after Atlanta are a study in controlled unraveling. Malik doesn't spiral. He doesn't confide. He observes himself, his reactions, the pattern of what triggers the fragments, with the same analytical precision he applies to everything else. He keeps a private document on an encrypted notes app, no names, just timestamps and descriptions. He is, even at 17, processing something supernatural, methodical. Trigger 2 arrives in May. A routine physical. His father insists on annual comprehensive checkups, a Williams family discipline. The clinic is clean, modern, efficient. Malik is fine, excellent health as always. But when the cardiologist attaches the leads for the ECG and the monitor begins its rhythmic beeping, that specific sound, the particular cadence of a cardiac monitor, Malik's hands begin shaking. Not trembling, shaking, uncontrollably, for approximately 8 seconds before he can clamp down on it. Cold sweat across his shoulders simultaneously, and a grief so specific, so sourceless, so adult, not the grief of a 17-year-old boy, but the grief of a man remembering the last sound he heard before he stopped hearing anything, that it takes his entire composure to hold his face neutral. The cardiologist notices his expression. Anxiety about the procedure? Malik nods. The doctor makes a small note and moves on. In the car home, Malik stares out the window and adds to his private document. Hospital, cardiac monitor, extreme physical response, grief, not mine, but it is mine, someone's last sound. Trigger 3 arrives at a charity gala in June, his mother's annual event, the Williams Foundation dinner. Malik is present in the social capacity his family requires, tailored suit, appropriate conversation, the performance of a young man being groomed for legacy. He sees a couple across the room. The woman is laughing at something, her husband beside her, hand on the small of her back. Standard gala intimacy. What makes Malik stop is not the laughing, it's the way the woman's hand rests on her husband's arm, proprietary but cold, the physical gesture of ownership without warmth, touching someone you touch a possession you're planning to sell. The rage arrives without announcement, old and specific and enormous, so disproportionate to the visual stimulus that Malik physically steps backward. He sets his glass down before he realizes he's doing it. His jaw locks, his vision briefly narrows. It passes in under 10 seconds, but the specificity of it, not general anger, but a targeted rage directed at something he cannot name, leaves him shaken in a way the previous triggers have not. He excuses himself, stands in the marble bathroom for 4 minutes, breathes, and looks at himself in the mirror. His reflection looks back, and for 1/2 second, the face in the mirror is older, darker under the eyes, more worn, a face that has been tired for months and does not yet know why. Then it's his face again, just his face. He writes in his document, "Gala, woman touching man, ownership without love, rage, not new rage, ancient rage, specific target I cannot identify, mirror, saw different face, older, exhausted, mine?" Trigger 4 finds him in September, not dramatically, not in a significant location, but in an antique store he wanders into on a Sunday afternoon while waiting for a friend who is running late. The store is cluttered, warm, smelling of old paper and wood polish. In a bin of old photographs, the kind antique stores collect in bulk, anonymous faces from anonymous lives, his hand stops on a photograph before his eyes have fully registered it. He picks it up. It's a man, late 30s or early 40s, medium build, wearing a hospital ID badge, slightly blurred but legible as a supervisor credential. The face is ordinary, not remarkable in the conventional cinematic sense, but Malik's recognition of it hits him physically, a full-body response, warmth and sorrow arriving simultaneously, the way you feel when you encounter something you loved and lost and thought you'd forgotten. He doesn't know this man. He has never met this man. He has no photograph in his life that contains this face. He buys it for $3, doesn't question the impulse. That night, he sits at his desk and holds the photograph under his lamp and looks at it for a long time. Then he opens his notes document and writes for the first time an actual question rather than a description. Is this who I was? He sleeps with the photograph face up on his nightstand, and that night, for the first time, he dreams. Not fragments, not flashes, a full, continuous, coherent dream. He wakes at 3 a.m., sits straight up, breathing hard, not from terror, but from the overwhelming volume of information that has just arrived. He knows a name, Terrence Johnson.
Malik turns 18 in January. By then, the memories are not fragments, they are a complete archive. Every significant moment of Terrence Johnson's life, accessible with the clarity of lived experience rather than the haziness of recollection. Not all of it, not every mundane Tuesday, but the load-bearing moments, the emotional architecture of a life. He remembers the lottery ticket, the gas station, the hood of the car, the numbers. He remembers calling Monique, her voice on the third ring, distracted, and then that subtle thermostat shift when he told her. He had heard love. He understands now, with the retrospective clarity of death, what it actually was. He remembers the next 6 months, not with the confused ignorance he experienced living them, but now with terrible understanding layered over the memory. He watches himself from the inside drink coffee every morning from a chipped blue mug and attribute his declining health to stress and age. He watches himself trust his wife's explanations with a completeness that was, in its own way, a form of love. The love of a man who fundamentally could not conceive that the person sleeping beside him was engineering his elimination. He remembers the metallic aftertaste. He remembers dismissing it. He remembers his last morning with the particular precision that significant endings embed in memory. The November sky, the kitchen window, the warmth of the mug against his thumb, the chip fitting naturally under his grip. He remembers rinsing it, setting it on the drying rack, not knowing it was the last thing he would ever wash. He remembers nothing after 9:52 a.m. Death does not provide footage of itself. But the memories continue, sourced from some other mechanism. His own funeral, seen from an angle he cannot explain. Monique's face, composed, professional in its grief. His mother in the front row, dry-eyed and stone-still. The specific quality of that stillness, Eleanor had known, in the way deep love sometimes knows what logic cannot confirm. He sees the wedding, 43 days, the boutique venue, the warm beige paint on the house he had lived in for 11 years. He sees the mug in the trash. Malik sits in his room for 3 hours after the memories arrive in their complete form. His door is closed, his phone is face down. He does not call anyone. He does not cry, not because he is suppressing emotion, but because the emotion is so large, so layered, that it has moved beyond the release mechanism of tears into something more structural, a reorganization of purpose. He thinks about Monique. He thinks about Deshawn. He thinks about $28 million and 43 days and a beige paint color chosen while a body was still cooling. He thinks about his mother, Eleanor, and whether she is still alive, still carrying that stone in her chest, still not knowing. He unfolds his hands, stands up, walks to the window and looks at the Chicago skyline, the city he was reborn into, the resources he was reborn with, the second life he was given. He thinks, not with rage, but with the cold, architectural patience of a man who has learned, in the most permanent way possible, what happens when you are not prepared. Not this time.
The first thing Malik does is nothing visible. This is deliberate. He has learned, from a life he is only now fully reclaiming, that the most dangerous mistakes come from acting on emotion before intelligence has finished its work. Terrence Johnson trusted too quickly and too completely. Malik Williams will not make the same error. He spends 3 months in research mode, appearing to his family as a young man thoughtfully preparing for his role in the Williams business empire. He attends meetings, he reads contracts, he asks the right questions about private equity structures and legal entity formation. Raymond watches his son with quiet pride, attributing the new seriousness to maturity. It is maturity, just not the kind Raymond can contextualize. Beneath the surface, Malik is building an infrastructure. He establishes a shell company, a consulting firm, entirely legal, registered in Delaware, and through it retains a forensic investigation firm with a strong track record in financial crime and medical fraud. He funds it personally through his trust fund in amounts calibrated to avoid triggering internal family financial review. The firm's brief is simple on paper. Research a wrongful death case from several years prior. Cold case research. Publicly available records. Nothing about this is illegal. Everything about it is precise. He accesses Terrence Johnson's medical records through proper legal channels, a surviving family member's request, filed through a healthcare attorney who has no knowledge of Malik's actual identity or motivation. Eleanor Johnson, Terrence's mother, is still alive, living in the same house, same city, same stone in her chest. She has never stopped feeling that something was wrong. She has never had the language or the resources to pursue it. She receives paperwork from an attorney informing her that an anonymous benefactor has engaged a legal firm to review her son's case at no cost to her. She signs the authorization form with a hand that shakes slightly. She doesn't question the source. Some part of her has been waiting for this for years. The forensic team works quietly and comprehensively. Malik gives them everything he knows, sourced in his cover narrative as information from a source close to the deceased.
The specificity of his guidance is remarkable. He knows exactly what to look for, exactly which intervals to test, exactly which financial records to cross-reference and why. The toxicology reanalysis conducted on preserved tissue samples from the original autopsy confirms what Malik already knows: cumulative arsenic compound administered in daily microdoses consistent over a 4 to 6 month period, undetected at time of death because the original autopsy had no cause to investigate poisoning. Standard cardiac workup, no red flags in the protocol because nobody was looking for red flags. The financial documentation assembles itself with damning clarity: estate transfer, marriage filing, 43 days post-death, joint accounts established, $28 million dispersed across multiple investment vehicles, some in Monique's name, some in Deshawn's, some in corporate structures designed to obscure origin but not designed for genuine forensic scrutiny. Phone records obtained through legal discovery process attached to the civil review filing reveal the pattern, not explicit messages because Monique and Deshawn were intelligent enough to keep operational communication oblique, but frequency and timing. Daily contact during the 6-month period, specific call clusters on mornings when Terrence and medical appointments, a complete cessation of contact for exactly 11 days following the death, the pause of people being disciplined about their restraint, and then resumption. And then there is Margaret Chen, an hospital administrator who worked alongside Terrence at Mercy General, who, during a routine conversation in the break room approximately 6 weeks before his death, had been approached by Monique, visiting the hospital under the pretense of dropping off lunch, and asked, in what seemed at the time like casual marital curiosity, exactly how life insurance policies worked in terms of payout timing for cardiac events. Margaret had found it mildly odd, had mentioned it to a colleague once, had never mentioned it officially because she had no framework that would have made it official. She does now. Malik's file grows over 6 months, layer by layer, evidence by evidence. The forensic team is thorough, the legal framework is sound, each element corroborated by at least 2 independent sources. When it is finished, Malik reads through the complete file once, from the beginning, slowly, every page, sitting alone at his desk at midnight. He does this not for strategy. He does it because Terrence Johnson deserves his story to be read by someone who knows it was true. He closes the file, sits in the silence for a moment. Then he makes a phone call.
Her name is Sandra Reeves. Retired federal investigator, 22 years with the FBI, the last 6 focused on financial crime and white-collar homicide. She had reopened 4 cold cases in her career that others had closed as natural or accidental. She had a reputation not for aggression, but for patience, the willingness to let evidence speak rather than forcing it toward a predetermined conclusion. She now ran a private consultancy, primarily for families seeking closure on cases that official channels had deprioritized. She was not cheap. She was not quick. She was thorough in the way that actually mattered. Malik had identified her through 3 months of research. He had verified her integrity through methods he did not share with anyone. He had arranged the meeting through an intermediary, a brief professional email requesting a consultation on a cold case review. She expected a family member seeking closure. She got something she would spend the next several years not quite knowing how to categorize. The meeting is in her office, a converted brownstone in Lincoln Park, clean and organized in the manner of a mind that processes chaos professionally. Malik arrives on time. He is 19 now, dressed simply, no ostentation, nothing about his presentation designed to impress or intimidate. He sits across from her at the conference table and sets the file between them without preamble. She opens it. He watches her read.
He does not prompt, does not explain, does not pre-frame. He lets the evidence speak in the sequence he has arranged it, starting with the toxicology analysis, moving through the timeline, then the financial records, then the phone records, then Margaret Chen's witness account. Sandra Reeves reads the way experienced investigators read, not sequentially rushing, but pausing at significant points, going back, cross-referencing. She spends 4 minutes on the toxicology report alone. She spends 6 on the financial documentation. When she reaches Margaret Chen's statement, she stops and looks up. This woman testified formally? Notarized affidavit, Malik says. She was willing. Nobody had ever asked her the right question before. Sandra looks at him for a moment, the particular look of someone trying to solve a secondary problem while the primary problem sits in front of them. She returns to the file, finishes it, sets it down, looks at him. The toxicology analysis alone is enough to reopen this officially. The financial timeline is corroborating. The witness statement adds motive evidence. A pause. How did you access the preserved tissue samples? That requires next of kin authorization. The deceased's mother provided authorization for a civil review, Malik says, all legally documented. And the phone records? Obtained through proper discovery process attached to the civil filing, nothing outside legal channels. She studies him. You've been very careful. I had reason to be. Another silence. Sandra Reeves has spent 22 years reading people. She is reading Malik now, not suspiciously, but carefully, the way you read something that doesn't fit the standard categories. How did you get all of this, she asks. Not the logistics, she understands the logistics, something else. What is your personal connection to Terrence Johnson? Malik looks at her. When he speaks, his voice is level, not performed, not rehearsed, simply honest in the only way available to him. I had a very personal motivation and a very long time to prepare. She holds his gaze for a moment, then she nods once, the nod of a professional accepting an answer that contains more than it reveals, because the evidence in the folder speaks for itself regardless of the answer. I'll need to bring this to the right people at CPD and then the state attorney. This will move slowly, you understand that. I've been patient. I can continue to be.
Justice, when it finally arrives, does not arrive dramatically. It arrives on a Wednesday morning. Gray sky, light wind, the kind of Chicago morning that is neither beautiful nor harsh, but simply present. 2 CPD detectives and a state investigator knock on the door of a house painted warm beige in a suburb that Monique and Deshawn have occupied for years as the architecture of a life built on stolen foundation. There is no chase, no confrontation scene. Monique opens the door in a silk robe, coffee in hand, and sees the badges and the expressions and something in her face, just briefly, just for a fraction of a second before her composure mechanism engages, collapses, not into guilt, into the specific terror of a person who has spent years knowing this door might open and now cannot believe it finally has. Deshawn is arrested separately at his office, which is somehow more clinical and therefore more final. The charges are read. First-degree murder, criminal conspiracy, financial fraud, wire fraud related to estate manipulation. The charges are extensive, meticulously sourced, each one attached to documented evidence. Monique's attorney, expensive, composed, reviews the file provided by the state's attorney's office and calls her that evening to say, carefully, that the evidence is substantial. How substantial? Monique asks. A pause that contains its own answer. The trial takes 7 months, the machinery of justice moving at its institutional pace. Malik attends sporadically, always sitting in the back, always alone, always in clothing that is expensive enough to be invisible in a courtroom. He watches with the attention of a man who has already accepted every possible outcome and is simply witnessing the formal confirmation of something he already knows to be true. Monique's composure holds through most of the proceedings. She is good at composure. It has been her primary instrument for years. But it fractures. Not at the toxicology report, not even at the financial timeline, not even at Margaret Chen's testimony about the life insurance question. It fractures when the prosecution presents the marriage certificate. 43 days. The date sits on the courtroom screen in clean black type, and the jury looks at it, and the math is obvious and requires no commentary. The prosecutor lets the silence do the work. 7 seconds of complete courtroom quiet. And in those 7 seconds, every person in the room does the same arithmetic and arrives at the same destination. Monique's jaw tightens. Her eyes go somewhere distant. Her composure does not shatter, but it cracks, visibly, like a windshield hit at exactly the right angle, one fracture line running from corner to corner. It is the most honest thing she has displayed in years. Deshawn's defense attempts to position him as peripheral, influenced, not architecting. The text message record, 173 consecutive done V messages, each one time-stamped to within minutes of Terrence's morning departure, makes this argument structurally untenable. The jury deliberates for 3 hours and 40 minutes. The verdict is unanimous. Life imprisonment, both of them. The $28 million, traced through forensic accounting, legally established as obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation of the estate and conspiracy to commit murder, is returned to Eleanor Johnson, Terrence's mother, to his sister, who had quietly suspected and quietly mourned for years, to the family that had been robbed not just of money, but of the ability to grieve cleanly, without the contamination of unresolved wrongness. Eleanor Johnson, 71 years old, receives the call from the attorney on a Wednesday afternoon. She sits in her kitchen, the same house, and holds the phone for a long time after the call ends. The stone she has carried in her chest for years does not disappear, but it shifts, changes weight, becomes something she can set down, finally, if she chooses.
Malik is in the back of the courtroom when the verdict is read. He does not celebrate. He does not feel triumph, not in the sharp, satisfying way revenge is supposed to feel in the stories people tell about it. What he feels is something quieter and more permanent, a completion, the closing of a loop that has been open across 2 lifetimes, through death and rebirth and 18 years of gradual, painful remembering. He watches Monique and Deshawn be escorted from the courtroom. He watches their backs. He waits until the room has mostly emptied, journalists filing out, families gathering, the institutional exhale of a completed proceeding. Then he stands, buttons his jacket, walks down the empty aisle toward the exit. He pushes open the courthouse doors and steps out into the Chicago afternoon. The sky is gray, that same particular gray of a November morning that has no drama in it, only finality. The air smells like rain coming, cold and clean and honest. Malik stands on the courthouse steps for a moment. He breathes in, holds it, breathes out, slowly, fully, completely. The exhalation of a man who has been holding his breath for 2 lifetimes. Terrence Johnson never got to exhale. He died with the breath still in him, stolen before it could be released. Malik releases it for him. The rain begins, soft, almost apologetic, the way Chicago rain starts in late autumn. He doesn't move to find shelter. He stands in it for a moment, face upward, eyes closed. He finally feels warm. Not the warmth of victory, the warmth of something that was owed being paid. The warmth of a soul that carried an injustice across the threshold of death and back into the world, and did not rest until the world acknowledged what happened. He opens his eyes, takes out his phone, dials a number he has never called but has memorized for 6 months. It rings twice. "Hello?" An older woman's voice, careful, slightly trembling. "Mrs. Johnson," Malik says. His voice is steady, warm but steady, the way you speak to someone you are protecting from a truth they cannot fully receive but deserve to feel the edges of. I just wanted you to know, he is at peace. I'm certain of it. A long silence on the line. Then Eleanor Johnson, 71 years old, begins to cry. Not the performed grief of a funeral, the real kind, the kind that has been waiting years for permission. Malik stands in the Chicago rain and listens. He doesn't say anything else. Sometimes the only thing left to do is bear witness. If you woke up tomorrow with full memory of a past life and you knew exactly who betrayed you and exactly how, would you spend your new life seeking justice, or would you choose to finally, truly let go? If you enjoyed this story, like the video and drop a comment with your thoughts. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Thanks for watching.